It, the Longarm Quilting Show, is brought to you by Handy Quilter, a manufacturer of easy-to-use long-arm quilting machines designed by a quilter for quilters. Paintbrush Studios, inspirational fabrics. Hobbs bonded fibers, when your project demands the finest. America's quilters continue to choose Hobbs battings as their favorite, whether they're winning Best of Show at Paducah or Houston, or creating a new quilt to celebrate the newest member of the family. Quilters love the consistency and feel of Hobbs. They prefer heirloom 80/20 for the traditional look of 100% cotton, with increased strength and durability and dimension. And for a more refined appearance and finer touch, quilters rave about Hobbs Tuscany silk, made from wild tussa silk, and the durable performance of the Thermore batting. Hobbs has been an official partner with Quilt It for several years. Welcome to another episode of Quilt It, the Longarm Quilting Show. I'm Jody Davis, your host, and my guest is Coleen Barnhardt, who just started quilting 15 months ago, and she made the quilts behind us, and she's doodle quilting. Look at this thing. Does this thing, I don't know if I want to eat it or make it. Or make one to eat.
It's sure fun. It's sure fun.
Now, how did you start doodle quilting? Where did this all come from? Because you said this was not your intention.
No, I actually started trying to develop a free motion kind of background fill to work on, that was my own signature kind of piece. And so I just started doing shapes that I've drawn for years and combining them. And it only took a few shapes, but lots of variability in those shapes for me to realize a couple of things. First, this is a great way to practice your skills in short bursts and develop your muscle memory and those skills as you go, so that once you combine them all, you can have this amazing effect, but you don't have to pre-plan so much. You don't have to worry about what am I going to do next. So for me, it was combining basic shapes into something that was really creative and different while practicing my skills to try to maximize my skill development, because I wanted to get good as fast as I could.
Yes, in 15 months, oh my God. Well, let's show these quilts underneath, because this kind of tells a story of the journey.
So,
your very short journey.
My very short journey. So this was one of the first pieces that I did to kind of audition after I had, let me go back, after I had practiced in my sketchbook. So that's critical. And I know a lot of people I'll talk to and they'll say, how did you get good so fast? And it's really about that practice. And I come from a background as an educator and a learning specialist. So I knew going in kind of the things that I needed to do to maximize that muscle memory development and skill development, and part of that was nightly practice. So in my sketchbook, I would just start working out these designs and these shapes and putting them together, and then as I would sleep, my mind was actually still practicing those skills.
Because you did it right before bed.
Right before
and
bed.
Kept going.
And so all night, I was kind of developing muscle memory, so I wouldn't even have to get on the machine.
Wow.
I could just do this in my sketchbook, and then the next morning I could come down to my machine and I could practice, and I was instantly better because my brain had actually made these connections all night as I slept.
Wow. Now, it's interesting hearing you as an educator, knowing that. For sure, and I hear it from other people too. People have said on the show so many times, and they just found it themselves, but you're saying there's really educational science behind it. So I kind of started as a background fill, and I'm practicing the whole time in my sketchbook. And people would come over and they'd say, oh, I want to see what you're working on. And they'd look through my sketchbook and they'd say, you need to turn these into a coloring book, because that's all the fad right now. Oh, that's where it came from.
And so I started thinking about, well, okay, it doesn't just have to be a background fill. It could also be an edge-to-edge design. So I did this for several clients, and they really liked it. And then I'm thinking in the background, but I want to color. I don't have time to do anything but quilting right now. How can I make quilts a coloring activity? And that's how I came up with the coloring quilt.
Brilliant.
Yeah, and it's just so much fun. So I get to pre-quilt things and sit around and do my little coloring activity, but then I have a quilt at the end to show for it.
Okay, great. Yeah. We're going to do the actual coloring, just so you all know, in the third segment of the episode, because you want to show us all of the doodling.
And kind of all the things that you can learn through doodling that maybe you weren't aware of while you're doing it.
Yeah. Okay, great. Yeah. And so we're going to do some sketching first.
Yeah. So there's a few shapes that I kind of started out with. So one of them is just a basic swirl. And I would practice these in my sketchbook over and over until I got good with them. One is a paisley shape, which is just really teardrops within each other. There's an elongated swirl that I actually, once I add some additional embellishments to, call my fiddlestick.
Oh,
it looks like a fiddlestick fern. Pebbles, or small circles. And then just some other combined pieces to that, like motifs. A wishbone.
Okay.
A ribbon candy. Just various little shapes like that. But pretty much all of these shapes, once you get good at just moving through these shapes, you can add all sorts of embellishments to them to get some really creative effects.
Yep.
So would you like to see how I combine those on the quilting machine?
Sure, I'd love to. Yes.
All right, now before I get started actually quilting, I wanted to show an example of how you can vary the same shapes and get really different results from them.
Okay.
And so I drew up a few of my fiddlesticks and just how you can go from a rounded clamshell kind of shape around it to pyramid or triangle shapes to feathers, and you can just vary those up with different fills on the insides. And so you can do a large area and never repeat the exact same design, the same exact way.
Right, and you could do the same thing starting with any shape. So
exactly.
There's so many combinations.
So when you're thinking about this, there's a couple of things that I always like to tell people. The first is always have those basic shapes that you're going to quilt in your mind, and have a menu of your different variables that you can change up.
Yeah.
And this is, for me, I call it free motion fluidity. I don't want to stop every couple of minutes and spend 5 or 10 minutes looking at the quilt trying to decide what I'm going to do next. I want to just be able to move from one shape to the next. And if I have these menu items that I can kind of have in my head or a picture of while I'm quilting.
Yeah, have a picture up is what I'm thinking to begin with.
Then you can just kind of look at that and go, oh, I haven't done that one. Now I'm going to do this shape, and I'll show you how we do that on the machine.
Okay, great.
Great.
Well, before you quilt, you get your official Handy Quilter Zinger. Yay!
I've been waiting for one of these. Okay, so one of the things that before I get started, I'm reminding myself I'm going to have these shapes as a menu that I'm going to go through and I'm going to quilt. But the other thing is, if you're going to want to color it in the end, you're going to want to make sure you close all of the shapes so that it's like a coloring book, and I'll kind of talk you through that as we quilt and my thinking process.
Good.
So I'm going to go ahead and start off here. Let's secure my threads. All right, so let me just start with a fiddlestick design.
Okay.
So I go up and around. Oops. And back out. Now, that wasn't perfect, but I'm not going to worry about it.
Okay.
Because you can make little mistakes with this, and it really doesn't show the effect in your final quilt.
Okay. I believe you.
Yeah. So I'm giving that an outline. There's a lot of echoing that we do here, and then you can come back here, and I'll just go ahead and give it a spiny back. And I'm thinking as I'm going, I want to color each of these shapes in, so I want to close them off. I mean, obviously, if you were doing an edge to edge, you wouldn't worry about that. But I'm always, when I'm practicing, that's kind of what I'm thinking. And I practice with black on white.
Yes.
Because even though I wouldn't necessarily do that on a client quilt, because I wouldn't want all my little oopsies to show so obviously, as I'm developing my skills, I'm actually able to see exactly what I'm doing really clearly, and it helps me to identify what things I probably want to practice more. So now I'm going to move into a paisley.
Oh, something real different.
Something very different and soft.
So if you think of those shapes as containers, because they've got a whole color, they can't leak.
Yeah, exactly. And when you're painting these quilts, it's nice to have that stitch line to help control the paint.
Sure.
Yeah. So now I might do what I call a simple feather, because I had to start somewhere with my feathers. I wasn't great with feathers when I started doing this. So this was the first kind of way that I practiced.
That's a good tip. Start here.
Yeah. And as I get to here, I don't want to cross over any of my lines, but I want to start thinking about if these were actually layered on a drawing or something that I was coloring, I want to keep things in the front and put things in the back. And so I might do here, I might come along to here and then travel down that shape until I can do it again. Right? Just so that it gives that impression. I can travel out there. I'm going to practice my echo.
Gives you another coloring channel.
It gives me another place to add some bright, bold colors. And then I'm probably going to come out here and I want to just fill. And I'm going to fill with some swirls.
Will those be colored in, or will they be all one color?
I would color them in. If I was doing this for a coloring quilt, I would probably do the insides of the swirls as a different color than the outsides, but just slight variations. I've got some examples that I can show you when we get to that segment. Okay, now if I do need to stop, then I can hesitate and I can make the machine stop while I think. Because if you try to think and quilt at the same time, I find I'm ripping stitches, and I don't want to spend time ripping stitches. So I get to this point and I go, okay, what haven't I done? Well, one thing that I didn't show you when I was going through the basic shapes was a leaf shape. And that's something that I use quite frequently to go as an offset to these swirls. So you can just put in a leaf shape. And see how I'm practicing my backtracking?
Oh, yes.
And I'm not worrying about it being perfect because it's practice. And because if I'm doing it to color, all of that's going to disappear. But I'm getting these short bursts of practice. So I can do some swirls and develop that kind of muscle memory. I can move into pebbles and develop that muscle memory. And they're just these multiple opportunities of short bursts, and then I can give that a break. And the other thing that's really cool about it is that once you've mastered, say, the swirl or the pebble, then that becomes really automatic. Your brain doesn't have to think about that anymore.
You can just go into that mode.
And then you can just work on developing some of your other skills as you go.
You can be thinking of the next thing.
Exactly. Yeah. And so, you can vary these in size. It'll work. All right. And you don't have to just stick to those basic shapes. You can also just throw in some random shape. Practice your echo quilting. This is great for practicing controlling the machine free motion on a diagonal, which can be hard. A lot of people rely on their rulers. And then I can just fill that with anything that I want. And when it gets colored, it has a great effect. I'm coming over here, that needs to be filled. I usually rely on a pebble or a swirl. But see how I'm thinking here, okay, I'm gonna come around here, that swirl's gonna tuck behind that. So I'm gonna practice my backtracking.
Oh, yeah.
See how I'm practicing?
Yes.
And I'm practicing my navigation. of all of these pieces. And you can see how my wobbly lines, I go over them, and they don't look wobbly after I've put a few fabric or thread lines over them. So when I first started doing this, you can see some of my earlier pieces, and I've gone over some of those thread lines 3, 4, 5 times because I wanted to even it out. It was just to color in. As I've improved, I don't necessarily need to do that on all of my quilting, but if I have a really tricky spot, or if I've made a little glitch when I'm going, I can do that, and it completely camouflages any mistakes that you've made.
Great.
Yeah.
Great.
So just keep going like that. You want to give it a try?
Oh my goodness, yes. How about if I try a pebble? Are we on? We're on.
It's on regulated. If you'd rather have it in manual,
so
you're welcome to
if I just start, it'll go, right?
It should.
Okay. Yep.
Looks great.
Yeah, well, sort of.
Well, the great thing about if you go and color it afterwards is you can just color it the shape you want it to be. And so that's a great way, again, to just not worry so much about your skill development.
Color it the shape you want it to be.
Right, as long as there's
a shade you want it to be. The shape. I got that. That's great. I think I'll leave it to the experts.
Okay.
What are we going to do in the next segment?
So what I thought I would show you is kind of how you can scaffold your skill development on some of these shapes, and also how you can pull individual motifs from a doodle into another project that you're doing. Oh,
great. So you're building your skills, you're going to end with that, but you're also thinking bigger with a whole lot of other things. This is great. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, okay. Well, we'll be back with more of Coleen and her doodle quilting in the next segment of Quilted, the Longarm Quilting Show.
We are the Handy Quilter Studio educators, and we want you to know why we love our Handy Quilter quilting machines.
Handy Quilter quilting machines are innovative. Check out the color touch screens, 2 kinds of stitch regulation, and computer-guided quilting.
Handy Quilter quilting machines are intuitive and easy to use, and they come in a size that fits your quilting style.
Handy Quilter offers training, service, and ongoing education. We care about your quilting experience.
Handy Quilter quilting machines are designed by a quilter for quilters. We'll be at a quilt shop near you or a show. Come give one a test drive. To learn more, call or click for a free demo DVD, or
follow the truck to Handy Quilter.
We're back with more of Coleen Barnhardt and her doodle quilting on Quilted, the Longarm Quilting Show. Coleen, in the first episode, you showed us how, and you explained also how you're building your skills. You've only been quilting for 15 months, you started doodling, and it's just all sorts of things have opened up because of the doodling. And this is the result.
Yeah. I actually started making this about 7 or 8 months into my quilting career. And so there were several pieces of quilting that I had not mastered yet. One of them was a nice circle that I could repeat over and over and over again. And another one were your traditional long arm feathers with the bump back and the backtracking. That was really difficult for me. And so I, having been an educator, a special educator, I'm always looking for like adaptive ways to help scaffold learning. And I was like, why not use rulers and gadgets to do that? And so for this part of the quilt, I used the mini circle template, and I was able to get regular shapes all the way along there. And then I also was able to use a tool like the Versa tool to help me with that backtracking so that it wasn't all over the place when I started. So do you want me to show you?
For the backtracking. So you'd already stitched one way and then you backtracked with the rule.
I'll show you how I did it.
Interesting.
It's slower as you go, but you're developing that memory and that ability to do it, and so over time you can just say, I don't need the tools anymore. So I'll show you that process.
Yeah, okay.
All right, so let's get that out of the way.
I'll just keep it, okay?
Yeah. Oh, no.
I'll make my own. How about that?
All right. So one of the tools that I use all the time is a water-soluble blue marker. If I'm doing it for a coloring quilt, I don't even have to remove the markings because when you're painting, it disappears.
Right.
So that's just a little tip that I learned. But I don't have a straight ruler here, but what I would do if I were going to do a channel like a string of pearls is I would probably mark that center line so that I know where I want the template to line up to, just to give myself something for that regular piece. So if you have this template in place, I would get started. And I'm just gonna hold, there's a ruler base on here. That's really important anytime you're using a ruler or template, because if you don't have that, then you're gonna break rulers and send your machine out of timing and potentially really hurt yourself. So always use that ruler base.
Hurt yourself, you might hurt the machine.
Well, all of it. I've been lucky enough that I haven't gotten too bad. So with these, you just rotate it around.
And it's perfect.
And it's perfect. And that's how I did that whole string of pearls that way. Now, as you're doing this, you're learning that movement and that size.
Even though you have the crutch, the training wheels, you're still learning it.
So the next step, once you feel like you've really got that going, is to pull that out. And now, I'm gonna run a channel instead of just that line through to line things up. Now I'll just offset this. Let's say I'm gonna make those string of pearls about that size. I want visually to know where my boundaries are. So I'll give myself that channel. Snip to, yeah. There we go. All right, so now I'm gonna start, and it's the same motion that you use when you're using the circle template, is you're going around to where you started and then around half again.
Yeah.
And I'm just using these as an idea. So that stitch length is awful large. That's 8, that's why. All right.
13.
So the better you get, mine aren't perfect here.
Better than mine, my dear.
But you can do that. And if you're still learning, you can do these.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And it really helps camouflage
Yes.
any imperfections that you have. So look at that.
Do you like, I noticed on the quilt that, I don't know if it was intentional or it was just because you had to backtrack to get somewhere else, but sometimes that darker, especially with the color, is really nice as in, it's like leaded, like stained glass,
Yeah.
so it's actually pretty when they're colored.
Right, so I don't worry about it. Whether I use the one line of stitching on one side or the multiples on the other, if I was really worried about it, I could go down that other side. But I find that once the color is in there, it distracts the eye from any of those minor differences, and you don't see it anymore. And if you were doing this as like a background fill or something with matching thread, you're not going to worry about those small pieces either. So I just never see a problem. On this quilt back here, I do these bubbles all the time, and you can stand up close and not even notice it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if we keep at it for a few months, we can be as good as you.
You can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Honestly, you've paved the way for us.
And I wanted to show you bump bump feathers with this.
Okay.
Okay. So one of the things that I like to do is that fiddle stick as a starter. And then I'm going to come back here, and the first thing is that teardrop shape. So I lay in the teardrop. But then I start getting panicked because I've got backtracking to do, and that's really hard, and that seems to be where everybody's heart rate starts to, well, you can take it really slow with a tool like the Versa tool and really save yourself with this. So it's got these great notches that'll fit right up next to the hopping foot, right there. So I can ride it up. And then I'm gonna set that down, my needle, I'm gonna stop it, and I'm gonna put that in place, right there. And then I'm just gonna help me to guide it.
Oh, it's like a hand on it almost.
Yeah.
You can push it.
And I can pull it away.
Oh, wow.
And do the next one. And then I can put that in there, and I can make my backtracking look amazing.
Wow.
You know, and if you're not exactly sure of what your feathers need to look like, you can go ahead and pre-mark these. Again, and if you were just doing a background fill, you could remove it with water, or if you're gonna paint it, it'll just disappear when you paint.
Yeah, I love that about the paint.
Yeah.
Wow, good.
So-
You're helping us a whole lot.
Just a way to develop those skills and do things that look way more complicated before you've really mastered that muscle memory. So you can still have some amazing quilting as a result.
Yep, have no fear. Use the tools.
But you don't just end up with a doodle. When you've done all of this practice, you can actually pull the motifs back out and have suddenly this great repertoire of different motifs that you can use either as microfills or as an edge-to-edge quilting design. And I brought some samples. Can I show you them?
Please.
Great.
Colleen, that looks kind of familiar.
Yeah, so these are just a minor modification of the basic leaf shape that we were doing with quilting.
And larger.
And larger, and you could even go larger than this. I mean, and you could go super small.
Yeah.
But you can see how it just gives great texture, and it's a really easy free motion edge-to-edge pattern. You want to see more?
Yes, of course.
All right, so one of the shapes that I didn't show you that I actually quilt quite a bit is a little flower petal motif, and I was able to pull it out and just do various petals, and you just go from one end of the quilt and back and then bump up again. And so it just, again, great texture, and here's your fiddlesticks without the embellishments. Makes this amazing swirl. And I put some paisleys in to fill in the pieces and move from one shape to another. For me, it's about not having to stop and start your thread.
Yes.
So how do I move through the design and have that flowability? This is the paisley shape with bump feathers around it, and I just love the funness of this motif.
Yep.
Just basic swirls.
Oh, and it's pretty in the thread, the very
yeah,
good thread.
this is a Wildlife thread, and I just love this one, this rainbow thread. It has a really short repeat, and so it shows great. And the thing I like about this one is that you can keep them all uniform, or you can be really free about varying the size and get some really amazing results. Yep. And then, remember how I was talking about scaffolding to your bump feathers? Isn't this a pretty edge to edge?
Wow.
And this is just those fiddlestick shapes, and then using your bump feathers to fill in and start over, and you get some really amazing effects, and it goes pretty darn quick.
Yeah, and so we keep practicing a little bit. We can do that.
Yeah, you can do this. You can do this, but do it in your sketchbook. Get really good at it
before
bed, and get it really good in your sketchbook over and over again. Really understand how to move through that design before you go to your machine. You'll find that you'll have a lot more success that way.
Wow, wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, in our next segment, we're going to do some painting.
Yeah, I'm going to show you how I color my quilts.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
That's fascinating to me, what you use and how you do it. Because anytime I've put a brush of paint to fabric, it goes all over the place.
I've got some tips and tricks that I've developed.
Excellent. I can't wait. But before that, I'm going to join Marie, and she is going to give us one of her short takes on longarm quilting. Marie, don't you just love the color in Colleen's quilt, the painted quilts? All that paint, all that color, and then the black lines. It's just wonderful.
I know, it just calls to me. I love all the color, and I love how the black sets it off.
Yes.
Okay, so black will set off the colors on your you know, fabrics as well. So we can go to our fabric and we can add black to it and set off those colors. And an easy way to do that is with the couching feet.
Yep.
So you can just add those to your machine. This is just black yarn. Just
Wow.
like you would knit a slipper or whatever. You just put that through the couching foot, and look how that just accents that around the outside there. And also, you know, you can just quilt freehand with it, outline all your stuff.
And it just
You know?
stitches it down. You're feeding that yarn through there and it stitches it
And
down.
it
I've seen
stitches
it work. It's
yep,
amazing.
it stitches it down while it goes. So you can do it freehand, or this was done with the Pro Stitcher.
Oh, you can use the couching foot with the Pro Stitcher.
Just use it with the Pro
Woo,
Stitcher and have yourself a little boot kicking good time,
hoot
right?
nanny.
There you go, you know, and just add to it. And you can add some little quirky things like this little tail here to get it started or end it. And, you know, it just looks awesome. Okay, so here's another, this is another idea. So another thing, so you can kind of see this one sneaking out down here, is 2 threads. So if you use 2 black
Double your
threads, so you can put one on each of your cones, you know, your thread spools, put a cone on each side, bring it down through the thread guide, and then just keep threading it through your machine, just like, you know, you normally would do one. Put both threads through your needle and start stitching. So you can see on this one, let's get these out of the road. You can see on this one I used 2 threads as I went through all of the leaves. So there's 2, one is kind of a shiny and one is a kind of a rust. And I did that, and then again just accented that with just that little bit of yarn, and then cute little sampler really quick. So I mentioned 2 threads, so 2 black threads to get a really dark line. So this was done with the Pro Stitcher.
That could be painted.
That could be painted, right? Well, let's think of kids.
Oh my goodness. And wait, I did not know this. I had not seen them, believe me. That's great.
But totally, right? We could do that. And we just did this with markers. Kids can do this
really? Oh,
and
that's
have
a
a
great
great time.
idea.
So we can coax them into quilting. I think once they start touching it and feeling it and get, you know, you get attached to it. And we so want, you know, younger quilters and to bring our, you know, family. We want other people to love it like we love it, right?
To get all the pleasure out of it, we do.
Yes.
And the
So-
friendships.
And the friendships. So there's another just little idea. And here's one you can do, you know.
Oh, that's a great idea.
This is, you know, you can add just some little pre-cuts on there. And okay, so we're talking about gifts here. We want to end with a gift. So this was a gift to Handy Quilter. When we first moved into our new building, we got this quilt from Country Traditions. So Leslie Main and her quilt shop did this quilt for Handy Quilter, and they couched the name on there. So you can kind of see as it goes around all those letters, you know, how it's accented, you know, because it has that couching on there. And so it's kind of a nice, you know, memory of moving into the building and a thank you from them. And so, you know, it's great to have in our building. You've probably noticed it every time you come into the studio, it's just hanging there. So a lot of things you can do, you know, like you can go from the couching, you can do the dark lines, but I really just want to see what else she does.
I know, I do too. I do too. To add that extra something to your quilt. Yeah, I can't wait for the paint to see how it really works, because I've been wondering.
I know they're so pretty.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
eye-catching.
In 15 months she's been quilting, but we won't go there.
Yeah, that's not right.
Well, in our next segment, we're going to see Coleen apply paint to fabric. So stick with us for more of Quilted, the Longarm Quilting Show. Paintbrush Studios brings the high quality and experience of a 40-year-old fabric company and a friendly Midwestern attitude to your local quilt shop with our exclusive fabric lines. From the staple group of blenders to the exciting new collections introduced each season, Paintbrush Studios fabrics are created with the quilt maker in mind. Visit the Paintbrush Studios website to download the free pattern for Crystal Rainbow and create your own treasure. We're back with more doodle quilting with Coleen Barnhardt on Quilted, the Longarm Quilting Show. Coleen has showed us how she has grown as a quilter. In 15 months, she's done amazing things. And out of this came this wonderful thing that you do with painting quilts.
Yeah.
It's phenomenal. It's gorgeous.
I call it coloring quilts because it's my take on the coloring book phenomenon.
And that's where the idea came from.
That
That's
is where it came from.
So now if you've been watching the other episodes, now we're at the stage where we get to put paint on fabric. It's so exciting.
Yeah. So one of the things, there's lots of different ways that you can apply color to quilts. But one of the things that I was really concerned about was a usable product that didn't feel plasticky in the end. And sometimes some of the colors that you can add through different mediums give the quilt a more, it's definitely an art quilt application and not necessarily a bed quilt application or something like that. So I wanted something that would maintain the soft hand of the fabric once it was done.
Right, wouldn't like sit on it.
Right,
Yeah.
that it would actually kind of dye the fabric and then was completely washable and that I could use day to day. And that's my coloring quilt. I'll throw it out on a table and use it as a quilt. I don't have to worry about it. I can wash it or whatever when it's done. And you may have noticed it had a soft feel to it.
It does.
It
It
didn't
feels like
feel
a quilt.
plasticky. So some basic materials that I use when I'm doing this is I always use a double bat, and I use Hobbs 80/20 with either a poly on top or a wool on top. It really depends on the application and how I'm going to use the quilt. If it's just going to be a usable object, like turned into a little accessory bag or a purse or something like that, then I'm just going to use poly. It's going to work great. But if it's going to be something like a show quilt or a wall hanging, I'll probably use wool. I also use a prepared for dye fabric, and that's really important because you don't want any optic whiteners or anything like that that's going to interfere with the color application and adhesion. So I always start with, for that, prepared for dye or ready to dye fabric.
Okay, where do you get that?
You can get it in lots and lots of places.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So if you just go into a quilt shop, your favorite fabric shop, and ask them for it, they should be able to point
Ready
you.
to dye fabric. Because I would think Dharma.
PFD. Dharma would have it, yeah. And we have it in a variety of our local quilt shops at home.
Great.
Yeah. So it's something that you can get online or at your local quilt shop. So those are important pieces that I like to remind people before we get started. So I use textile paint. And this is a product by Jacquard, and I don't have to do any fabric prep, and I don't have to apply any textile medium at the end.
Oh.
I can paint it, heat set it, and it's done.
Heat set it with an iron?
I don't heat set it with an iron because it's pre-quilted, so you know what I do?
What?
I throw it in my dryer.
And it's enough?
I put it on the hottest setting. The manufacturer, I went and I read all of the details on this, and they actually gave me the idea. Throw it in your dryer for 35 minutes. I do about 45, 50 minutes. And on the hottest setting, and it comes out and it's completely washable and ready to go.
That's so much easier than taking it out.
Yeah, and you wouldn't want to do that with a pre-quilted sample because it would, depending upon the type of batting you use too particularly, but it would smush it all. And I tried that. I've tried lots of different things and I didn't like the results. And that's why I went to the dryer application, but super easy.
Well, thank you for doing the legwork.
Yeah, I do like to let the piece dry for a couple of days before I throw it in my dryer. I want to make sure that it's as dry as possible before that. But how about I share with you some of my tips?
Yes.
All right. So I've pre-mixed, or I've put out just a few different shades of blue here. And I'm just going to show you kind of how I use the material. One of the things that people always ask me is, how do you control the bleed?
I asked you that in the beginning,
like you were saying. And there's a couple of things that are really important for me in my process. One is a very small brush.
Okay.
That's because you don't want extra water to get into the bristles up at the top, because anytime there's extra water in this process, you're going to have bleed. Okay. So that's really important. You also need a synthetic brush that's really rigid. Not all acrylic paintbrushes are as rigid as I like, but when you push on that tip, you want it to have a really good firm resistance. Okay.
So we need to choose our brush in person.
Yes, and small, like I said, smaller. This is a size 2, I think, round brush. But you have to be careful with manufacturers of brushes because a 2 round from one manufacturer is like a 1 round from another manufacturer. So you're really just looking for something, this is less than 1/2 of an inch in length and nice and small. And that's important when you get to small areas, but also to control bleed. Now this is a little different than the doodle quilting that we've been doing in the other segments, but it's the same process. Do you want me to show you real quick how I kind of came up with this?
Yeah.
So I have these rulers that are circles. And so let's just pretend that this is a quilt top, and I could use my blue soluble marker, and I could mark the concentric circles that I wanted. Now this is one that I do to kind of brainstorm different motifs that I might want to quilt out. So I have lots of different circles in here. But once I get my design chosen, I would only have to put down the circles that I would need to mark things. And so once you have this in place, I just start doodling.
Oh.
And you can see how, you know, I started in the middle and I laid in these small pebbles, and then I just went around in this area. Then I went out and did these shapes, and I just built the mandala or the circular motif from the center out, all the way out to the edge, keeping in mind that I wanted to close off every area so that it would be like a coloring book. Yeah, so that's how I came up with this. And I can do this pretty quickly. I could either pre-draw it if I want to be really careful, but a lot of the times, like on the quilt on the wall, I just do it while I'm quilting.
Oh.
Yeah, just because once you get kind of a routine or a repertoire, you kind of...
You have that confidence, you know
that
where you're
confidence. Yeah. So I'll give this to you.
Yes.
All right. So flowability with the paints is really important. I always add a little bit of water. You can add up to 25%, but you don't want to add too much water. And you also don't want to get water on the metal part of the brush, because then it's going to travel down as you're painting and bleed out. So I always have lots of paper towels nearby so that I can dry that off as I get it wet. So I'm going to just start here with some blue, and I'm going to lay in my color in small little bursts right next to that black line. And that's going to create a barrier as I paint up to that, so that it's going to start drying. So it's drying right now. And as I add more color to that, then it's less likely to bleed.
Okay.
Now, I'm not saying you won't ever have bleed when you do this. You can. Certain colors are a little more tricky than others. I always recommend to my students that they practice a little bit first, either on a spare piece of the fabric or a little sample that they've done. But once they get the hang of it, they just fly. They don't need that anymore. I do my color blending mostly on my quilt tops. I used to actually create like maybe 12 different shades of blues and pick and go as I went. That's what I did on my coloring quilt that I showed earlier. But I've gotten a little lazy, and now I just like to do it as I go. So I'll lay down a darker color, and then I'll pick up another blue, and once I get that on there, I can use what's called extender, which is just it's the same textile paint material, but it's colorless. So you're not adding water to do any of the blending. I'm painting as I go, and I don't know if you can see that on the camera, but I'm starting to pick up those other colors. Now I'm going to pull in a little lighter blue in here, and you can see how the color starts to blend right on the fabric. And it's as easy as that. I do this in front of the television at night when I'm not really interested in what's on TV. You know, and I can pick up the darker colors. I can even go on the color wheel to a color next to a color, and like this one's a lot darker. It's a darker purplish blue. And I can lay that in, and then once I get that color on there, I can pick up some of the colorless extender and blend those in. And you see that nice shading?
Yep.
That starts to happen. And so you can do this with so many different shades and so many different colors. Another strategy that I use is I'll mix up maybe 5 different, say greens. Greens are always one of my favorite colors to work with. And I might start with yellows, greens, and blues in my paint palette, because they're all right next to each other on the color wheel, and then I can just start saying, okay, this one's going to be yellow, this one's going to be green, this one's going to be blue, and then kind of shade and blend them all together. And so you get these great watercolor kinds of effects.
Gorgeous.
Yeah. So would you like to see how this looks finished?
Here it is.
So
Wow.
look at how that pops.
amazing.
It really transforms whatever you're working on. And you can do some amazing things with it. This was just totally impromptu. I usually do blue swirls. I was looking for something different. And so to try to make this less time consuming, on the yellow part, on the yellow swirls, and I do this a lot with my blues as well, is I'll go ahead and lay in a base color of, like in this case, yellow, and then I'll go back while that section, maybe I only did a quarter of this background, and while the paint is still wet on the fabric, then I can go in and I can layer in my shades of orange and browns, and reds to kind of give that dimensionality to it.
And then they blend in real well.
And then they blend in while they're wet. Once you let it dry, it's a lot harder to work with. So another tip that I like to tell people is to think about when you start your painting process as, I'm going to finish that complete shape before I walk away. So I never leave just a partially painted shape because it's going to be really hard to blend in later.
Right. You might see the edge of it where you stop.
Yeah, or you're going to spend a lot more time trying to make it look right. So I'm always, when I'm thinking about, maybe I have 15 minutes to paint, I think about, okay, I'm just going to do one shape at a time and kind of judge how much I can fit into a session. I have a little paint tray that has a cover on it.
Oh, that's great.
So I can just cover it up and I can leave this all out. I've left these projects out for a couple days at a time. So just when I have a minute or in the evening, it's just my little project and it works great.
Wow,
So,
it is outrageously beautiful.
Just tons of fun.
It is, and you've taken all the mystery out of it, because I've always wondered, how
It's
did they do
really,
this?
I was intimidated by it, and the great thing about the internet is there's just all these artists sharing all this amazing stuff, so I just started doing my research and learning how to do it, and it was great. And I have some other projects that I've made that I could show you different applications as
Love to
well.
see it.
You don't have to do a quilt. This is probably either going to be a tote bag or a pillow. I have made myself my guild.
That's great. That's smart.
My guild name tag. So.
And it says you.
And it says me. So, obviously I'm a Longarm quilter and I quilt for hire. I want people to know exactly what I do. So I made myself my name tag and it works out great. And then what I've been doing since I became a quilter in this last year is I've been living my dream. And so I made this for my studio. And again, it was just a fun little project that I did and painted. And so I've got this great little motivational mini quilt. So you can do all kinds of little things. And I find that small projects, are great because they don't take as long to paint.
And you're practicing.
And you're practicing, you're getting, these little things out of the way, and then you've got some samples and some just different things to see along the way.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, how can people find you and find your classes? I'd love to take your class.
Well, I'm teaching locally.
Okay.
I'm in the Portland area of Oregon.
Well,
and
could people hire you guilds from elsewhere? Okay,
Yeah.
there we go.
So there's that. So my business is called The Quilted Thistle, and I have a website, and I post most everything I do on Facebook and Instagram.
Yep.
So that's a great way to find me, is Facebook and Instagram as well.
I bet you have a lot of followers.
It's growing.
Yeah.
It's fun to see it grow. The coloring quilts have really struck a chord with people, and they're pretty excited about it. So either, people who can quilt it themselves, but I'm also finding a market with people that don't have those quilting skills and hire me to make a coloring quilt for them to color.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Right, of course.
Yeah, so there's, just trying to meet demand. And
You just never know, do you?
you never know where it's going to go. I had no idea that I would take my quilting here, but it's been a wonderful experience.
And that's what's fun, the mystery of it, that you don't know.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, thank you so much,
you.
Coleen, for opening this door for us.
So lots of fun.
Yep. Thank you for watching Quilt It, the Longarm Quilting Show. We'll see you next time for more quilting fun. And this is fun.
Yeah, it is fun. It is fun.
We are the Handy Quilter Studio educators, and we want you to know why we love our Handy Quilter quilting machines.
Handy Quilter quilting machines are innovative. Check out the color touch screens, 2 kinds of stitch regulation, and computer-guided quilting.
Handy Quilter quilting machines are intuitive and easy to use. And they come in a size that fits your quilting style.
Handy Quilter offers training, service, and ongoing education. We care about your quilting experience.
Handy Quilter quilting machines are designed by a quilter for quilters. We'll be at a quilt shop near you or a show. Come give one a test drive. To learn more, call or click for a free demo DVD or
Follow the truck to Handy Quilter.
For information on how to sign up for this and future episodes, visit qnntv.com.